Atelier has gone far on the Switch. The Arland and Dusk trilogies, Nelke, Ryza, and its follow-up. All of these games are cute and fun adventures into the world of alchemy, though I was waiting for something else to eventually pop up. The mystery entries were where I went from liking the series to loving it. That is thanks to a little alchemist named Sophie. Her game has finally come to a new handheld, and I was thrilled to be able to experience it on the go for the third time. Packed with a few new features, here is my review of Atelier Sophie DX for the Nintendo Switch. The plot of Sophie is about that titular character. She lives in a village and walks in the footsteps of her late grandmother, whom used alchemy to help residents of the town. When she finds a magical talking book that is knowledgeable in alchemy, she goes on a self-journey to learn as much as she can to one day be as helpful to everyone around her and be someone her grandmother would be proud of. The thing I love about Sophie is its story. The adventure is filled with slice-of-life scenes, and every interaction between Sophie and the others is filled with cuteness and comedy. I found myself endlessly laughing every time a new little scene popped up. I also enjoyed that Sophie is kind of a mix between the Atelier style of RPGs with just a little bit of that typical JRPG tone as you get towards its finale. One other thing to note is voice acting. Sophie, along with its follow-up, was one of the last games of the series to feature an English dub. Not all scenes are dubbed, and there are mispronunciations for the word atelier.
Here, she runs an atelier.
But it is nice to have VA options. When it comes to gameplay, this is a turn-based RPG with material collecting and item synthesis features. As you play, you'll be traveling through dungeons to collect items and occasionally fighting enemies in turn-based combat. Being part of the Mystery DX trilogy, this version of Sophie comes with some new features. Some smaller enhancements include a photo mode and speed multiplier for combat. The biggest change is the inclusion of a new costume for Sophie to wear and new cutscenes and backstory for her grandmother. I won't give away all the spoilers of these new scenes, but there are quite a few of them and they add a lot to Sophie's character. Also, the costume is absolutely adorable. With main progression, Sophie's big feature was the removal of time limitations. While it isn't as big of a deal nowadays, it was back then. In Sophie, your task is to do certain things to create new alchemy recipes and work towards the next milestone in uncovering the book's memory. This could be as simple as making a certain item or as long as getting the respect and support of various characters from around town. Accomplishing all of these tasks normally involves spawning story scenes and going out into dungeons to collect items and fight off enemies for more items. Also, you can come back and use those items to make new ones. All of these things make time progress, so not having limitations on what time you can use really helps. Especially when you get to the one flaw I found with this progression system. Some of these tasks are a bit grindy. One story chapter has you quote-unquote becoming friendly with artisans. This requires you to do story events for the main characters. Spawning some of these is pretty simple, but all that you need can be difficult to figure out and find. Essentially, you have to visit everybody, go to bed until the next day, visit everybody again, go to bed until the next day, and complete the process until the story finally goes forward. This can easily rack up hours on its own, as it is not always set when certain events will spawn. Other chapters progress easily, but this one always takes a really long time to figure out and do. Now, the dungeon and combat stuff is pretty easy. Every dungeon has collection points where you can grab materials to put into your basket. Everything resets when you leave, so if you take everything and have room for more, all you gotta do is leave the dungeon and re-enter it to grab more of that loot. Same goes for respawning each dungeon's enemies if you want to fight more to grind for levels without going back home. Granted, you can't do it infinitely, as this game uses an LP system where everything you do in the field lowers that stat, and when it reaches 0 you lose all combat effectiveness, and have to go back to town to recharge it, but it is pretty exploitable all the same. Going back to combat, people who came into the series with Ryza will notice that the combat system here is a bit different. Instead of being in real time, we have traditional turn-based battles. You put in your commands for each character and watch as they and the enemies act out those commands. There is some enhancement with the support feature that lets characters defend each other from damage or add follow-up attacks, but it's a pretty simple system overall. It's also worth noting that items are limited here. Ryza gave fans a remarkable system where items have charges, but when you use all your bombs in Sophie, you don't have any more until you go back to town and either make or buy more. It's not really a huge thing, but will certainly be noticed by those that came in from the newer entries. Finally, we have the alchemy system. You've got your typical let's turn materials into new items by combining them, but also the alchemy level and grid system. You gain experience towards new alchemy levels for each successful creation, and many items require certain levels to be crafted, especially towards the end. On the actual process, each material has a color that can match colors on the cauldron grid. The more colors at the end, the higher each ability the item will have. You can also create new cauldrons to have larger grids with different options for deeper customization. The weapon and armor crafting systems are similar to alchemy as well. You combine materials into new weapons as metals and cloths become available in the story. One thing I really like about this is the ability to upgrade your weapons. After each one is made to enhance your stats, you can use excess metal and cloth to continually upgrading them, making that initial attack plus 10 boost significantly larger before the next weapon unlocks. All of this comes together in a very simple task-oriented game. You don't have massive story stuff pushing you forward, just little keep busy tasks that will rack up the time. Speaking of, you should be spending at least 25 to 35 hours in Sophie before finishing the game. This is fairly standard for the series, but a nice amount of length for that $40 price tag. Next up is presentation. Visually, the game looks good and about the same as it always has. Sophie was a good looking game even on the PS Vita. The models are nice and smooth and haven't changed that much since the Vita days. But performance is something to discuss. The frames drop in handheld mode in some dungeons, but run nice and smooth in docked mode. However, there is an odd issue I found on stream a couple of weeks ago. Whenever you have software downloading to the Switch while playing, there is a significant amount of delay in loading sequences. I was downloading Liddy and Suelle while streaming, and nearly everything had extra load times, from crafting to collecting materials in dungeons. When the download was cancelled, everything returned to normal. With that, we move on to battery life. On the original model, Atelier Sophie has a battery range of 2 hours and 28 minutes up to 3 hours and 40 minutes. On the Nintendo Switch Lite, it has a range of 2 hours and 35 minutes up to 3 hours and 48 minutes. And on the Redbox or V2 2019 model, it has a range of 6 hours and 6 minutes up to 7 hours and 11 minutes. In conclusion, Sophie has returned to handhelds and is cute as ever in her new getup. On the downside, this game has some FPS hiccups in handheld mode, and some story tasks are a bit confusing and repetitive. If you can trudge through that one story chapter though, this is an adorable adventure filled with cute humor about a girl trying to live up to her grandmother's legacy. Reviews to go rates Atelier Sophie DX for the Nintendo Switch an 8 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching and have a great day.